So the question we all ask when someone gets up to give a presentation is, who is this guy? Or who is this woman? But this is a tech conference, right? So I guess it's who is this guy? And that's not a shot to the women. It's a shot to the tech industry, because I have 3 daughters and I'd love to see them excel. But the question you're asking is, who is this guy? Another way of putting it is, can I trust him? And if you looked at the bio, you saw that I'm a pastor, and you probably put a question mark behind that word. I had a neighbor ask me what I did 7 or 8 years ago when I was out in my yard in Berkeley, and I said, well, I'm a pastor, and she thought I said I was a bastard. She said, you're a bastard. So why is a bastard or pastor talking at a tech conference? It's a great question. But you need to know I've lived in Northern California now for 10 years, and to quote the visionary Erlich Bachman, if you watch Silicon Valley, being a Christian is borderline illegal in Northern California. So I have prepared myself for questions like that, so I'm not, I'll remain unflappable when it comes to what's a pastor doing or a bastard doing talking at a tech conference. But just to give you a little bit of my bona fides, I have been able to launch these 3 locations at Christ Church over the last 10 years. We have also funded 2 startup churches, and in 2007, we founded a 501c3, which is a religious nonprofit. And along the way, perhaps most significantly, I've sat across the table with dozens of entrepreneurs like you, listening in on their hopes and fears, because if you look up entrepreneur in the dictionary, it says a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses taking on greater than normal financial risk. So I hope I'm a little bit qualified to spend at least 15 minutes talking about what might be missing from your pitch deck, having talked to dozens of you over the years. I have 2 caveats from listening on the morning. The first is I'm talking mostly to people who that pitched this morning probably are not going to learn anything from me. Those were fantastic pitches. But secondly, after the panel discussion with the VCs, it seems like the consensus that the venture capitalists were telling us was, don't pitch, don't ask for money, just show up, volunteer, desire to be mentored, and then they will ask you if they can invest in you. So I don't even know if we need pitch decks anymore, premised upon what happened this morning. But nonetheless, we're going to look at this for a minute. If you look up pitch deck, you're going to find in the Google machine or the interwebs some fantastic diagrams like this one that are going to tell you things about the team, the problem, the advantages, the solution, the product. Great, great, great resources out there, as has already been said. I've been listening to the Startup podcast very recently. 3 great questions that are asked in that podcast, which I'm sure all of you know, are these. Every good pitch deck answers these questions. What is the problem? What is our or my solution? And how are we going to add value to the world or make money? Those might be great questions for you to wrestle with. You may need to establish more clarity around identifying the problem. You may need to establish more clarity around identifying your solution. You may need some reality around your anticipated ROI. But I'm actually after something different in my time here. Those things are fairly obvious. I'm after something else. And this is a picture I just took in Paris. You're going to see 3 Paris pictures because I was ecstatic to have some time there. Does anyone know who this statue is? It's in the Louvre. You can shout it out. We're all tired here, so we need to wake up a little bit. If you said Venus de Milo, you're exactly right. I chose this picture because pitch decks are full of big ideas that we are supposed to be confident about, passionate about, experts about. And then, if you turn this picture around, I was the only one that snuck in behind her, but I wanted to take a picture of all the tourists who were taking pictures. But these big ideas, they tend to overstate how much of all those qualities we really possess. They don't interact with these other parts of us, which say things like, what if I am wrong? What if someone else said these things first or better? What if I'm right, but this idea isn't nearly as significant as my unbridled enthusiasm suggests? And therefore, what if I look like a fool up here, all lathered up about something that is actually mediocre in its importance and scope? So what I'm after when I ask you the question, what's missing from your pitch deck, is actually this right here. If you get a close-up, this is the DeMilo coin slot, at least it used to be called as such. I want to call it that because you're not going to forget this talk, all right? I'm hoping my 13-year-old daughter doesn't listen to this, but nonetheless. I'm talking about the DeMilo coin slot of your pitch deck. Another way of putting it is the negative space. That's what an architect would describe the space around and between your pitch deck. Or an educator would call it the null curriculum, which is another way of saying what's between the lines and behind the charts and the pictures in your pitch deck. So this is my contention in these few moments we have together, or thesis, as it were. There are things that you intentionally, albeit wittingly or unwittingly, there are things that you intentionally withhold about your plan, your product, and your person. And while these things might not belong in your pitch deck, probably a bad place for them, you better know what they are and deal with them appropriately. Otherwise, you'll expend all sorts of energy and spend all sorts of resources denying or avoiding them. So what is missing from your pitch deck with respect to your plan, your product, and your person? In other words, my purpose for these 15 minutes we have together is twofold. Number one, I'm trying to save the world from a legion of entrepreneurs that aren't emotionally and relationally healthy. Because I think in the long run, this will save marriages and business partnerships and families and communities from sabotage. And then secondly, I'm trying to help you do some work on the front end of your startup so your therapy costs are significantly less on the back end of your startup. So I just want to unpack these three things that you need to know about your pitch deck with respect to plan, product, and people, or person. And plan, I'm speaking principally about two things, funding and scaling. So great article in the New Yorker about Andreessen back in May. Just want to use it to set this comment here. Pitch meetings are minefields. If a VC asks you, when you get to 100 engineers, are you worried about the company culture or excited? The correct answer is 100, I want 1,000. Reid Hoffman, a VC at Greylock Partners who co-founded LinkedIn, told me, I look to see if someone has a Marine strategy for taking the beach, an Army strategy for taking the country, and a police strategy for governing the country afterwards. So what are people getting at with respect to your plan? And this is mostly about funding and scaling. This is what is probably underneath your pitch deck. Again, this is the null curriculum. This is the white space or negative space. You may be thinking to yourself as you sit across the table from these VCs, I'm projecting financials based mostly on what I know you want to hear with little basis in reality. You want 100 million revenue in a $1 billion industry, you got it. Or you may be thinking, hey, if your valuation is too small, it's going to rattle my confidence. But if your valuation is too big, I'm afraid the pressure will break me. You may be thinking, I think you're an idiot, but I'll happily take your money anyway, because you have it and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm pointing this out because as you think about your plan and what will fund that plan, you need to recognize that as you potentially move forward in partnership with these venture capitalists, you have probably started the conversation by relating in hyperbole, by relating as indentured to them, and by relating with contempt towards them. And if you're not aware of that going in, wow, there are going to be some train wrecks along the way. So let's look at this with respect to scaling. You may be thinking this as you talk about scaling with reference to your pitch deck. I know I'll have to work 80 hours a week to realize the ambitious goals investors have for me, but I really don't know how I'll manage that. Or this, I contend that as the company scales, I'll treat my coworkers justly and with equity. I want to see them become all that they can become, but I really don't have a plan for their development, health, and growth. Or you may be thinking, anyway, I want to build a big, successful company, but I'm not sure I have the competency to handle a company of more than 10 people. And other things you may be thinking about. I'm not prepared to have other owners and investors running my company and telling me what to do. I have not planned for a non-exit strategy, which Bambi was alluding to earlier and talking about thinking about long thoughts. I have not planned for failure or success. So I told you a couple pictures of being in Paris If you know the story, there's this arch affectionately known as Napoleon's Little Arch, which sits right outside the Louvre because he commissioned this arch after this great victory, only to discover that when it was built, it was too small, and so the army, including Napoleon, could not even pass through it. They had to pass around it, and then it wasn't until 15 years after Napoleon's death where the Arc de Triomphe was actually built. The point is, we, in our pitch deck, aren't preparing by thinking long thoughts when it comes to our scaling and our funding. So to me, this all boils down to planning the work and working the plan. And I hate to sound cliche, but your pitch deck is full of great ideas for your plan to scale. But remember, your pitch deck is not a set of plans or a blueprint for the work that you're called to do. So you're going to have to ask a non-entrepreneur to help strategize as you make that plan. You're going to have to ask a non-entrepreneur, probably a manager, to help you as you work that plan. So let's talk about the second thing for just a second, product. And for me, this is all about desirability and impact. So as you think about what's missing in your pitch deck, and I'm talking again about the DeMilo coin slot, the negative space, the null curriculum, you may be thinking this to yourself. I really have no idea if customers want this. Our research is thinner than it sounds. Our beta customers are all of my relatives, and no one is really looking for the solution that we offer. I just think they would be if they knew that they should be. How many of us think that? Or secondly, my differentiation is really indistinguishable. I fell in my own moat. I inserted that parentheses because I heard moat this morning for the first time. I'd never heard that before. We're probably almost like a lot of companies, and there are probably several other startups that are almost like us. I really have no idea if customers want this. When we think about desirability and then we think about product impact, Gavin Belson, anyone seen Silicon Valley? Fantastic quote. I don't want to live in a world where someone else is making the world a better place than we are. As you think about your impact and you think about your pitch deck, you have to ask hard questions like, am I really revolutionizing ... Am I really disrupting anything other than my own life? Am I pivoting so many times that I'm just going around in circles? I'm not really sure how the world would be better off because of my product, or who would be hurt by my product, or what should be concerning me about the product that I'm developing, or if my product becomes the next Google, will the world be worse for the wear? These are things that you should never put in your pitch deck, but they're things you need to think about because they're going to be confronting you as you roll out this product desirability and impact. So this is, again, what Bambi talked about. It's battling short-sighted thinking with thinking long thoughts. And then finally, and where I do think I have a bit more acumen to speak appropriately, is when it comes to your person. As I said, I sit around across the table from dozens of people who have started companies, and some have been very successful. Others have started companies, they failed miserably. And there are questions that these people are asking. Questions like, a pitch deck is about persuasion, but am I fully persuaded myself? Or a question that should be asked, what am I giving up to pursue this startup? And what do I hope to get in return? The gap in between is the cost, and is the cost worth it to me? How much money will I need to be happy? Or how will I handle failure? Or how will I handle success? Or the question that may be endemic to the human condition. How do I deal with this incessant internal murmur of self-reproach? I hear it right now. People, what are they thinking about me as I'm talking right now? I can't believe I just said that. Oh, my Alabama accent is residual. You know, these are the things we are dealing with day in and day out. Or another way of putting it is, I know there are 802 other VC firms like you, each one looking for that 1,000 times unicorn, but I'm feeling more like a Shetland pony. So it will behoove you to figure out what is beneath all of these sentiments. And this is what I think is beneath them as I close. I really feel like all of us precariously with great deep anxiety sit on three-legged stools. It's how we live our life. These three legs on the stool are fear and anger and guilt, and we can't run away from any of those emotions. And so I think it would behoove us to sit down and ask questions like, what am I most afraid of? What makes me so angry? And what is making me feel so guilty? Because even though you would never put those things in your pitch deck, I can assure you they are in the negative space in the core curriculum of that pitch deck. So, get around people that know you well. Think about the lies you may tell yourself. Usually, if you can identify and grab the tail of the lie that you're telling, you'll learn a lot about yourself. What bothers you most about the criticism you might be receiving? Figure it out, because that's going to tell you a lot about yourself. So, again, the contention that I had in this short talk is that there are things that you intentionally, wittingly or unwittingly, withhold about your plan, and by plan I'm talking about funding and scaling, your product, and by product I'm talking about its desirability and its impact, and your person, and by person I'm talking about the anger, the guilt, and the fear that each of us brings into every moment of our lives. While these things might not belong in your pitch deck, you better know what they are and deal with them appropriately. Otherwise, you'll expend all sorts of energy and spend all sorts of resources denying or avoiding them. Giving the talk because I'm trying to save the world from you, and I'm trying to save you from a lot of therapy costs. My hope, and this is the last slide, is that you take this slide deck with you to a coffee shop and spend an hour getting underneath the answers to many of these questions, because I think they will make you a healthier person as you do. So that's it. Thank you very much. Questions?
There's a lot in there. How do you get a hold of this?
Oh, I think they're going to post all the slide decks. I'm happy to make that happen on Vator TV. Yeah. And there's a lot in there. I know that I received that as encouragement, and also as you haven't learned how to build a pitch deck yet, so I need to work on that. Thank you. Yes, saw somebody. Or I was blinding by the light. Any other questions? Nope. Yes, sir.
Pitch deck recently that you've seen that you just love?
Say that again?
Is there a pitch deck that you've seen recently that you love?
Oh, that's a great question. Now I should be able to remember the name of it, but there's a guy that's pitching this educational supplement to the public school systems in Berkeley and Oakland, which is fantastic. It's full of a ton of information, but it's done very tastefully and with great passion. Yeah, it has something to do with tree in the title. Thank you very much.